On the limiter, baby, on the frickin' limiter, on the Interceptor, on a public road. That's so dumb. What do you guys think? Do you want to see a Royal Enfield track day video? I'll do it. I gotta say, the handling on this thing is greater than the sum of its parts. Kind of adds to the excitement to be able to have your brakes be a little squishy. All right, folks, this one's been a very long time coming. I'm actually really excited to do this episode because, spoiler alert, this little motorcycle is much more than the sum of its parts. What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Yammy Noob. Today, we are doing our first ride and impression on this here Royal Enfield Interceptor 650, the INT650, the parallel twin, as it says on the side there. This is our new beginner bike giveaway. And I'm really excited about this thing because I think this is a perfect beginner bike in terms of price, accessibility, power, what you're getting for the money. This is a pretty perfect little beginner bike for those of you looking in the retro classic market type of thing. Now again, this is a giveaway motorcycle, so if you hit the link below to shop.yammynoob.co, use the code INTERCEPTOR, and the first 100 orders are actually going to get 10% off, which is a pretty good deal. We've actually got some Arai helmets in stock, so if you want a great deal on an Arai helmet, use that link down below and get yourself some pretty sweet stuff. You'll get max entries to win this Royal Enfield Interceptor 650 for the month. As always, you can always go to yammynoob.co and sign up over there. That's the best way to get entered, in my humble opinion. Let's walk over the specs on this machine really quick. So other than it being a very handsome looking little retro classic bike, the Royal Enfield Interceptor 650 is powered by this big old lump of a 648cc air-cooled parallel twin. This is pretty unique in the new crop of beginner bikes to have a big old air-cooled motor like this. It's got the nice 270-degree crank, nice burble as you'll hear over there. Oil cooler right here. So unlike the Bonnevilles, you can see there's a lot more space in between this frame and this engine because it's just a more simple little motorcycle. Best part about this motorcycle, though, is that it is fuel injected. No carburetors on this bad boy. We're rocking 18-inch wheels up front and rear, which is kind of peculiar. 130 90/18s up front. Excuse me, 100 90/18s up front and 130 70/18 out back. That's kind of funky. Claimed power on this motor, by the way, 47 horsepower and 37 foot-pounds of torque. 48 horsepower, 37 foot-pounds of torque, something like that. Basically perfectly A2 compliant in what we would consider here on Yammy Noob a perfect power figure for your first motorcycle. There's some really nice little features on this thing. This quilted seat here looks pretty cool. It's actually really comfortable, which is awesome. We got this one in this chromed out gas tank here, so you can kind of see me there on your screen. I should be reflecting back towards you. And I think the badging here looks really nice. And this thing has a lot of curb appeal, man. It's got a lot of curb appeal well beyond its price point of about $5,800 at the point of entry for it, but you're probably looking closer to $7,000 out the door after tax, title, license, freight, prep, all that sort of stuff on this machine. Non-adjustable suspension up front, preload adjustable, dual shocks out back like a proper classic motorcycle. And it's got these really cool twin exhaust pipes kind of flowing out the back of it. It's a very handsome little motorcycle. And there's a lot to say about it, and I'm really excited to go ride it. Wet weight of about 470 pounds, so a little bit on the heavy side for this here Royal Enfield. What did I just say? Oh my God, I can't say it. Royal Enfield Interceptor 650. I'm trying to get the words out too fast. Let's swing a leg over this thing. Very approachable seat height. I'm about 5'11". Flick this over. By the way, it's got a center stand right over here. So if you want to put the stand down, do some work on it, do an oil change, whatever you want, pretty easy going. Pretty good seat height on this thing. Feels pretty good. You flick the key. Very simple, classic RPM and speedometer right here. That's pretty awesome. Nothing fancy. You got on, kill switch, ignition, high beam, low beam, passing beam, turn indicators, horn. That's all you need, baby. That's a funny sounding horn. Okay. Let's go ahead and put it in neutral, fire it up, and let's hear how it sounds. So the Interceptor 650 here is on the stock pipes, and it's very quiet. You'll notice here doesn't produce a whole lot of sound, but these are very easy to slip out and put a slip on and get yourself a little more sonic boom out of your mighty Interceptor 650. So let's go ahead and pop it down into first. Let's go take this thing out for a quick ride. Pulling away with the Royal Enfield. Oh my goodness, I can't say this word. Pulling away with the Royal Enfield. Wow, I just messed it up again. Please leave a comment down below with some speech therapists for me. Jesus Christ. Pulling away here with the Interceptor 650. Clutch engagements really light and simple. Slow speeds on this motorcycle are very, very approachable and very nice. Gonna make sure this guy sees me. Nice, he did. Now, slow speeds on this bike, very approachable. For the beginner rider, I think that's a great thing. Despite having a curb weight of about 470 pounds, slow speed stuff on this motorcycle, you wouldn't really estimate that it weighs about 470 pounds, to be perfectly honest. This is a motorcycle that feels much more small, much more lively than its curb weight would suggest. It's actually really easy because of the ergonomics to just pilot this motorcycle around in slow speed conditions. It's very, very simple to get this motorcycle left and right and in parking spots and whatever else you need as you're learning to ride. Again, the ergonomics package, since it is so standard and kind of upright, very, very easy to do stuff like this. Very, very easy to just kind of flip it around, go left, go right. Doesn't really feel that difficult. And again, these ergonomics are going to be great for doing this sort of thing. You could do little parking lot maneuvers all day long on this motorcycle. It's very, very approachable. Waking it up here on the power a little bit. Best part about this motorcycle versus the other kind of entry-level options out there, your Ninja 400s, your MT-03s, and Ninja 650s, those sort of things, you get a big engine for not a lot of money that sounds pretty freaking good. Honestly, all things considered, this motorcycle sounds pretty awesome. Let's wake it up a little bit, shall we? Let's hear it. It's not very fast at all, but you can literally, you probably can't even hear it going, but I can. It's got a really nice sound to it, and that's something that, you know, a lot of beginner bikes cannot lay their claim to. You usually don't find a motorcycle that is going to have a great sound in the beginner bike category, unless you're looking at like a Harley Sportster or, you know, maybe an MT-07 if you're really kind of pushing it for the beginner bike thing. But if you want a big bike sound, but you don't want big bike power, this motorcycle definitely fits the bill. Wide open in first. So I just went wide open in 3 gears, and I just caught up with traffic. That gives you a sense of how not intimidating and not very fast this motorcycle is. Clicking it up through the gears here, I am pretty impressed with the gearbox on the Royal Enfield. It's actually very snickety, very positive engagement. The clutch lever is very smooth and very light, so you grab your gears, you can grab up and down as much as you need to. Very positive engagement. I'm not finding any slop or weirdness in the gearbox. It feels like a Kawasaki gearbox, honestly, which is one of my favorite Japanese gearboxes and one of my favorite gearboxes out there. It's definitely not a Grom-like gearbox, which I think a lot of people have the perception that a Royal Enfield is going to feel kind of bad. I definitely had that perception before I purchased this thing and got it for a giveaway. You get the sense that it's going to feel kind of crappy and crummy, but honestly, it does a really good job of feeling pretty good for the price. Again, this is a $5,800 motorcycle, brand new. Harley Davidson could take a page out of this book and provide something for the entry-level rider that is actually going to work pretty well and is not going to be, you know, super expensive. That's the problem in today's world, is these motorcycles are all so dang expensive. And Royal Enfield is the salve. The Interceptor 650 is the salve to all the expensive motorcycles. Let's go ahead and try to get it up to about 70-ish miles per hour. 6-speed gearbox on this thing, which DRZ 400s each are hard out. 6 speeds here, spaced out pretty well. Now, I think this motorcycle has a slight imbalance in either the front or the rear wheel. I am noticing a little bit of a hump while I go down the road. And that's just pretty classic imbalanced wheel stuff. That's not going to be anything that's a huge problem or anything like that. And this motorcycle feels good, man. Like, it feels really good doing this sort of thing. it does not have much in the way of passing power. Like if you roll onto it, you're barely doing 80, 85 maybe, and that was wide open in 6 for about a good 10 seconds. Yeah, it's going to be something that you're going to have to plan your moves a little bit with it, but that's no problem. It can clearly do a nice highway stint if it needs to. And, you know, it's a motorcycle that, you know, since it's a standard style motorcycle, you can kind of do what you need to do with it. It's not going to be a bike that, you know, you're like, oh, it's only good at the highway, it's only good in the twisties. It's kind of, it's a jack of all trades. It's this classic style thing that's meant to perform well in a lot of conditions. Now, one thing that I have to talk about as I approach this little braking zone here are the brakes. And look, I understand it is a motorcycle built to a budget. If you look closely, you can see the parts where they obviously cut costs. For example, like the passenger pegs are attached directly to the frame. They're not bolted on, they're literally just part of the frame. So if you were to go down on this thing, if you took some damage on the passenger peg, you may incur some frame damage, which is not the best thing in the world. But the brakes, okay, the brakes are just not great. The brakes are just, oh my goodness, the brakes are really bad. They're squishy, they're not communicative, the front end is pretty poor. But that's okay. This bike isn't really meant to be a sport bike. It's not really meant to be like a super canyon carving type of thing. But, you know, for what it is, it actually does pretty well. Like back there, we just had the little suspension check, and it's this really bumpy little section of tarmac back there. And I gotta say, like, it impresses me how the Royal Enfield suspension is doing. It impresses me that the front end feels pretty communicative. The rake on this motorcycle is actually pretty aggressive. It's much more like cantilevered forward than you would think. It's not really raked out much. The front end is pretty pokey and forward. Let's go ahead and hit this speed bump here on the Royal Enfield. That was honestly not that bad. It was a little stiff, but honestly, all things considered, it could have been a lot worse. Let's go ahead and hit this speed bump here. At speed. Yeah, like it'll do it, you know? These bikes are definitely built, obviously, with Indian roads and Indian conditions in mind. It reminds me of when we had the GSX 250R, where it had a mud flap on it, and it actually did pretty well down a kind of gravelly dirt road type of thing. And this motorcycle kind of feels the same, where if you needed to trundle down a little gravel road, given its more upright ergonomics and relatively forgiving suspension, you know, it could definitely do it. I'm not saying it's a scrambler by any means. This is not a motorcycle that I would say, oh yeah, go rip up a forest road or have some fun doing stuff like that. It's a bike that, out of necessity, if you really needed to get yourself down a certain road, which in India and a lot of places that are not as developed as America, you definitely have those kinds of places. Even their good roads, I know that I've visited, you know, my home country in Brazil, even the good roads are terrible. So this is a bike that feels very at home on those kind of nasty, pothole-ridden, dirty, kind of gravelly road sort of things. Let's enter in the twisty section here. Let's talk about the handling on the Interceptor 650. I gotta say, all I did to this bike, I obviously aired up the tires because it got delivered to us on a big truck, and tires were at like 23 PSI front and rear, so I had to air them up. So once I aired up the tires, I gotta say the handling on this thing is greater than the sum of its parts. 470 pounds on these skinny, kind of weird retro tires, and the thing actually boogies pretty good. It's a pretty communicative front end. I actually really like it. What do you guys think? Do you want to see a Royal Enfield track day video? I'll do it. I'll take that for you guys. Like, it's pretty stable. I've definitely ridden it's kind of entry-level beginner bikes that were worse than this. This is actually pretty decent, and we rode the Continental GT back last year, I think around September or October, and I think the Interceptor 650 is actually the one to get. I find the handlebars kind of being more upright like this definitely works out a little bit better for you as you're charging down a little twisty road. Wide open on the apex there. Yeah, sure. And again, because it's a beginner bike, you're well within the boundaries of what is acceptable on public roads. You're not going to be, you know, powering out of a corner and doing 140 miles per hour. This thing's speedo tops out at a very generous 120. I would estimate this bike's top speed to be about 105, 110 miles per hour. So if you are interested in top speeds, this is the wrong motorcycle for you. But for everyday kind of use and in the hands of someone who actually knows what they're doing, this motorcycle can actually be extremely competent and confidence-inspiring. The 18-inch front end and the 18-inch rear end, that makes it feel a little strange in terms of tire choices, right? I'm not really sure what kind of rubber you could spoon on this thing that would be a little bit better than these. I think these are like Zoma Cruise tires. I don't even know what these tires are. I was actually looking at them earlier and I could not identify what these tires are. But if you wanted to set a stickier rubber, you could definitely do it. But yeah, this thing, like, again, it's all about how it's greater than the sum of its parts. And I'm really happy we got it, and I'm so glad to be proven wrong. You know, I think a lot of folks on the channel would comment and say like, oh, Yami, you're being unfair to the Royal Enfield and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, we're just having fun most of the time, guys. I'm not going to sit there and very adamantly and very aggressively tell you that, you know, Royal Enfield is a terrible motorcycle. You know, you can look at the spec sheets and poke fun, and because obviously, like, you know, it's a 650 and it makes 47 horsepower. You're like, oh, that's not great. But that's not really what it's all about here. And honestly, this bike is not really a cruiser. I think a lot of people see the specs and they see a motorcycle that they're like, oh yeah, like that's just like a little cruiser bop around sort of bike, right? It actually like feels pretty damn good on the side of the tire. Wide open here, baby. On those terrible squishy brakes, but that's okay. It adds to the excitement, doesn't it? Kind of adds to the excitement to be able to have your brakes be a little squishy. Go, little Enfield! On the limiter, baby! On the frickin' limiter! On the Interceptor on a public road. That's so dumb. That's a lot of fun. But taking it back to normal people speeds, let's think about the Enfield and its actual use case here. On the brakes here, oh man, those brakes are just not exactly what I'd call confidence inspiring. And I wonder if there's a way to fix them. However, I do think since it's a single disc, the bike is relatively heavy, and the tires are relatively bad. I don't know if we can really get this thing to feel pretty good, because a lot of folks like to think that brakes are just the kind of the pads or the fluid, but there's a lot of other stuff that comes with brakes. Like honestly, your front suspension will actually dictate a lot of how your brakes will perform. If you're not compressing the front end and getting the tire to dig in, that's going to cause problems. If your actual tire is of poor quality, you're going to have problems actually getting the thing to stop and brake and grip in time. And also the weight of the motorcycle. If your motorcycle is just heavier, it's got more momentum, it's going to just take longer to brake and it'll take more force to brake. So all those factors combined is what dictates a motorcycle's braking performance and braking feel. But I do think that we can try to improve the feel on the Royal Enfield. I certainly would like to before I go and take it out on a track day, because I feel like now that I said it, I feel like I have to. And luckily, now that I have my little trailer, I can take my race bike and take the Royal Enfield and basically do a track day on my race bike and go and do one session on this bike and give you guys the video. Kind of get away with it a little bit, you know? Yeah, I'm honestly really impressed just how comfortable this bike is. Going back to the ergonomics a little bit, this motorcycle is a little funny in that the pegs, whenever I'm sitting on the bike and I got my feet where I need them to be, I feel like they're always touching and bumping into things, and the pegs kind of hit my shins too whenever I put my feet down at a light or something like that. I feel like I'm always touching something on the side of this bike. It might be some clearance problems on this thing, and I just hope that side case doesn't get too hot, otherwise my boot is going to melt. My boot is going to be taken prisoner once again by another retro-styled motorcycle. But yeah, like let's talk a little bit about the kind of fueling and throttle response on this thing. I mean, it's nice. It's really linear. It's really linear. You get on here, crack it from off to on throttle. It's really predictable, really linear. The only places I really find it to be a little lacking, and it doesn't really matter because once you're up and moving, which is really where you want the throttle response to be good, is when you're actually completely stopped at a light and you're trying to just like wick the throttle and rev it. I find the connection to throttle and bike a little bit wanting. It's not exactly perfect. But when you're actually up and moving and rolling, the thing does pretty well. I gotta say, the thing actually, the throttle response is really nice and linear. Okay, we're gonna try like a sort of 0 to 60 test here. I'm gonna let that truck go. I'm gonna try to do a proper 0 to 60 on this bike, and I'll get Whitney to edit in how long it takes. Let's go right here. Nobody coming. Go ahead and try to. That's 60. So, not a freaking race spec launch, but kind of like a normal leaving a stoplight kind of fast launch. I don't know how fast that was. That felt like it was maybe 6 seconds, 7 seconds, something like that. So about as fast as a hatchback, a hot hatchback or something. Like a Ford Focus ST or a Fiesta or the Golf GTI or whatever the hell. So, you know, it'll keep up with stuff. It's not slow. It's still a motorcycle. It's still pretty quick. Even little Ninja 400s and stuff can do 0 to 60 in 5 seconds. So these little bikes are actually pretty quick. But I'm just really impressed by the overall package here. The overall sentiment for me is this is a well-built, good little motorcycle for the price. Like, yes, if you compare it against a Bonneville, if you compare it against motorcycles that cost twice as much, everything starts to fall apart, right? Like, the levers feel like crap, the brakes feel like crap, the engine performance is absolutely dog slow compared to a Bonneville. But that's kind of silly to compare a motorcycle that costs twice as much. Is this half the bike that a Bonneville is? Definitely not. Definitely not. This is like 75% of what a motorcycle is, of what a Bonneville is. And it looks great. It's got curb appeal for days. This is a motorcycle that when we had the Continental GT out on the street and asking people thought it cost $25,000, which is mind-boggling. I think the chrome tank and the looks on this bike definitely make it feel like a much more upmarket motorcycle. And that's pretty sweet, man. Like, that's cool to own a bike that you can be proud of. And, you know, only snobby motorcyclists like myself might look at it and be like, oh, it's a Royal Enfield? That's okay, you know. But most people, they don't know the badge. It looks, I mean, it used to be a British brand. Now it's an Indian brand, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, so many motorcycle manufacturers are making bikes in India and Thailand, Triumph in particular, KTM as well. This is exactly the type of thing that Harley Davidson should be doing, and honestly, it's why this bike is extremely good selling. It sells super, super well. It's a good price, good looks, good performance, everything you need, nothing you don't. What more could you want? Yeah, again, my only real complaint with this thing is the front brake feel. I think that's just like pretty bad. The front brake feel is really pretty bad on this thing, but it does stop the motorcycle, and it's not that fast that warrants, you know, some dual disc Brembo Silema style brakes on this thing. You don't need that on this motorcycle, but I would like some better braking setup just because I prefer to have a nice feel at the lever personally. And on this beautiful view of the Austin Hills here in Texas, I will wrap up this video, folks. Thanks so much for watching and tuning in. I hope you appreciated this first ride and impression on the Royal Enfield. Oh my goodness, I did it again. From the beginning of the video. I can't say this word. The Royal Enfield Interceptor 650. Holy moly, I can't say it. Hope you liked it. Hope you enjoyed this look on the motorcycle. Remember, we're giving away this bike for the next 2 days, I think, after this video goes live. Use the code INTERCEPTOR on shop.yamdeep.co. That'll get you max entries and 10% off for the first 100 orders. So we got some pretty cool stuff there that you get a great deal on. And yeah, as always, you can always sign up to win over on shop.yamdeep.co, and yamdeep.co, of course. Become a member, join our Discord. That's the best way to get your entries, in my humble opinion. And with that, I will catch you guys in the next one. See you later.
Well, look at you. You've made it to the end of another Yammy Noob video. You should consider yourself pretty lucky because I have curated this one right over here for you to continue watching. It's probably just as good as the one you just saw. Unless you hated the one you just saw. I don't know, maybe leave me a comment down below about how much you hated it as well too. Or just keep watching this one. Make sure you keep watching Yammy Noob. Don't forget to keep watching Yammy Noob. That's the most important thing. Keep watching Yammy Noob.